High above the sun-baked deserts of southern Peru, a vast and silent mystery stretches across the earth, enormous figures carved into the landscape so large they can only be fully seen from the sky. These are the Nazca Lines, a series of ancient geoglyphs that have baffled explorers, scientists, and dreamers for centuries, who created these intricate designs, some as long as 1,000 feet and wide. Were they meant as messages to the gods, celestial maps, or something far more enigmatic? The truth is, despite decades of research, we still don't have all the answers. And that's where the myths come in. From tales of alien visitation to whispers of lost civilizations with impossible knowledge, the Nazca Lines have become a magnet for wild theories and unbelievable stories. Some claim these lines are landing strips for ancient astronauts, while others insist they hide clues to a forgotten human history far older than we've been taught. But how much of this is fact and how much is pure imagination? Today, we're diving deep into 30 of the most astonishing myths surrounding these enigmatic desert drawing stories that blur the line between legend and reality, each one more captivating than the last. Imagine standing in the middle of the desert, staring up at the sky as a hummingbird the length of a football field emerges beneath your feet, or a massive spider perfectly symmetrical as if it crawled straight out of a nightmare. The Nazca Lines don't just defy explanation, they ignite our curiosity in a way few ancient wonders can. So whether you're a skeptic, a true believer, or just someone who loves a good mystery, prepare to question everything you thought you knew. Because by the time we're done, you'll never look at these desert etchings or the stories behind them the same way again. One of the most persistent and tantalizing myths about the Nazca Lines is the idea that they were never meant for human eyes at all, that these sprawling designs were actually landing strips for ancient astronauts. This theory gained explosive popularity in the 1960s when Swiss author Erich von Däniken claimed the lines were proof of extraterrestrial visitors, suggesting their sheer scale and precision couldn't possibly be the work of primitive humans. His best-selling book, Chariots of the Gods, painted a picture of an advanced alien civilization guiding early human hands, leaving behind these colossal markings as if signing their presence across the desert. But let's break this down. The Nazca people, who flourished between 500 BCE and 500 CE, were masterful engineers and artists skilled in manipulating their harsh environment. Archaeologists have uncovered simple wooden tools and ropes that could have been used to plot and carve these geoglyphs, proving human ingenuity was more than capable of such feats. Even more convincing, the figures align with celestial events like the summer solstice, suggesting they held deep spiritual or astronomical meaning for the Nazca, not interstellar travelers. So why does the alien landing strip myth still capture imaginations today? Part of it comes down to sheer awe. Faced with something so massive and mysterious, it's understandable why people might leap to extraordinary explanations. But there's also something seductive about the idea ancient mysteries wrapped in sci-fi wonder. The truth, though, is often more fascinating than fiction. The Nazca Lines weren't messages for the stars, they were a testament to the brilliance of a civilization we're still coming to understand. And really, isn't that incredible enough? Another captivating theory suggests the Nazca Lines weren't just landing strips, they were a cosmic message board, a giant billboard for extraterrestrials scanning Earth from above. Ancient astronaut theorists point to the sheer precision of the lines as evidence, arguing that only an advanced intelligence could have created such perfect geometric shapes visible from miles in the air. Some even claim certain figures resemble beings with elongated heads or helmets, fueling speculation that the Nazca people were depicting their alien visitors. Yet when we look closely, the science tells a different story. Researchers have demonstrated how the Nazca could have achieved this precision using simple stakes and ropes to plot out their design. The straight lines, often aligned with underground water sources, vital for survival in the arid landscape, and those so-called alien figures, many match creatures native to the region, like the hummingbird or the spider, deeply symbolic in Nazca culture. Even more compelling, several geoglyphs align with the sun's position during solstices, suggesting they functioned as a massive celestial calendar. So why does the extraterrestrial communication myth persist? It taps into our timeless fascination with the unknown, the desire to believe we're not alone. But the real story of an ancient civilization mastering their environment to create art intertwined with the stars is no less extraordinary. The Nazca Lines weren't calling out to aliens, they were speaking to the heavens in a language of earth and sky, a testament to human ingenuity reaching for the cosmos long before modern science caught up. One of the most enduring explanations for the Nazca Lines presents them as a colossal astronomical calendar, a celestial map carved into the desert floor to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. This idea was championed by German mathematician Maria Reich, who dedicated her life to studying the geoglyphs from the 1940s until her death in 1998. Reich believed the lines pointed to key celestial events like solstices or planetary alignments, arguing their precise angles couldn't be coincidence. Her meticulous fieldwork revealed many lines did align with solar positions, fueling theories that the Nazca used them to predict seasonal changes critical for agriculture in such a harsh environment. But modern archaeology tells a more nuanced story. While some alignments with celestial bodies are undeniable, they're not consistent enough to support the idea of a unified astronomical system. For every line that points to a solstice sunrise, another seems to lead nowhere astronomically significant. Instead, researchers now think the lines served a ceremonial purpose, acting as sacred pathways for rituals. Imagine Nazca priests walking these lines during religious festivals, their footsteps tracing the shapes of animals and spirits as offerings to deities or ancestors. The desert itself may have functioned as a spiritual canvas, where the act of creating and following these massive designs was as important as their final form. What's fascinating is how both interpretations, calendar and ceremonial site, reveal the Nazca's profound connection to their environment. Whether marking the heavens or honoring the divine, these lines reflect a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature. Reich's astronomy theory, though not entirely accurate, wasn't entirely wrong either. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a blend of practical observation and spiritual expression where science and belief intertwined. And that complexity is what makes the Nazca Lines so endlessly compelling, not as a single-purpose tool, but as a multidimensional testament to a culture that saw no divide between the earth and the sky. Among the most practical theories about the Nazca Lines is the idea that they served as a giant map not of the stars, but of something far more precious in the desert: water. This theory suggests the geoglyphs were markers for underground aquifers, guiding the Nazca people to life-sustaining water sources hidden beneath the parched earth. It's a compelling thought, especially when you consider how vital water would have been in this arid landscape, where rainfall is scarce and survival depended on ingenuity. Geological studies have revealed something fascinating. Many of the straight lines and trapezoidal shapes do indeed align with underground water channels. Researchers using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have found that certain lines trace the paths of subterranean streams, suggesting the Nazca might have been tapping into these hidden reserves. Some even propose the trapezoids acted as ceremonial gathering spaces near water sources, blending practicality with spirituality. But here's where the myth starts to unravel. While the water correlation is intriguing, it doesn't explain everything. Why would the Nazca create elaborate animal figures like the hummingbird or the monkey if simple straight lines could mark water? And why do so many geoglyphs appear in areas with no detectable underground flows? The truth is, water mapping might have been one function among many, a piece of the puzzle rather than the whole picture. What's remarkable is how this theory reflects the Nazca's deep understanding of their environment. Even if the lines weren't solely water maps, their creators clearly knew where to find the desert's hidden lifelines. It's a testament to human adaptability, turning a harsh landscape into a canvas for both survival and art. So while the water map myth oversimplifies the line's purpose, it reminds us of something profound. Ancient civilizations didn't just endure their world. They mastered it. Some of the most haunting theories about the Nazca Lines suggest they weren't just meant to be seen. They were meant to be walked. Imagine sandaled feet moving slowly along the massive outlines of spiders, monkeys, and spirals, tracing these sacred pathways in solemn procession. This myth proposes the geoglyphs functioned as ritual corridors, where the act of walking them was a form of prayer or connection to the divine. It's a powerful image, one that resonates with what we know of other ancient cultures who merged movement with spirituality. Evidence supporting this idea comes from Nazca pottery and textiles, which often depict figures with outstretched arms. Some archaeologists interpret these as dancers or ritual participants. Even more telling are the miniature geoglyphs found near the larger ones, like scaled-down versions someone could walk in a ceremonial reenactment. And then there's the desert itself. The Nazca Plateau is eerily quiet, the ground emitting a strange, metallic ring when struck, a phenomenon that could have been interpreted as the voice of the earth, making it the perfect stage for rituals meant to bridge the human and spiritual worlds. Comparisons to other ancient cultures deepen the mystery. In England, the chalk figures of the Uffington White Horse and the Cerne Abbas giant were likely sites of seasonal rituals, their outlines maintained by generations of celebrants. Across the Pacific, the Rapa Nui people of Easter Island walked ceremonial paths between their iconic moai statues during ancestor worship ceremonies. These parallels hint at a universal human impulse to mark the earth with symbols and move through them in sacred practice, but skeptics raise valid questions. If the lines were ritual pathways, why are so many etched in areas nearly impossible to traverse on foot, like steep hillsides? And why haven't excavations uncovered more artifacts, offerings, or tools along their routes? The truth may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps only select lines were walked, while others served as symbolic representations, visible only to the gods from above. What's undeniable is the Nazca Lines' spiritual weight. Whether walked or worshipped from afar, they speak to a culture that saw the desert not as barren, but as a living canvas, a place where every footprint, every carved line was a conversation with the unseen. Among the most poetic explanations for the Nazca Lines is that they were never meant for human eyes at all, but were instead sacred messages, giant prayers scrawled across the desert floor for the gods to read from above. This theory paints the geoglyphs as a form of celestial communication, where the Nazca people spoke to their deities through the language of earth and stone. Imagine kneeling in the dust, carefully removing dark surface rocks to reveal lighter soil beneath. Each stroke of your hand an act of devotion stretching hundreds of feet toward the sky. Archaeological evidence supports this spiritual interpretation. Nazca artifacts frequently depict supernatural beings, deities with wild, staring eyes and radiating headdresses, often shown floating above the earth. Their pottery and textiles overflow with imagery of flight, birds, winged figures, and even what appear to be shamans transforming into avian forms. This suggests the Nazca saw the sky not as empty space, but as a realm where gods and ancestors dwelled. And what better way to reach them than by creating art visible only from their domain? Some researchers propose specific connections between the geoglyphs and Nazca cosmology. The hummingbird, a recurring motif, was likely more than just an animal. It may have symbolized resurrection or the soul's journey, given how these tiny birds seemingly die in cold nights only to revive at dawn. The notorious astronaut figure with its raised hand could represent a shaman mid-ritual rather than an extraterrestrial visitor. Even the straight lines might trace spiritual pathways, marking where heaven and earth briefly touched during solstices or eclipses. What makes this myth so compelling is how it mirrors spiritual practices worldwide. From Tibet's giant mountain mantras visible only from afar to the Native American medicine wheels aligned with celestial events, humans have long tried to bridge the earthly and divine through landscape art. The Nazca Lines might be part of this universal impulse, except they scaled it to breathtaking proportions. Unlike other cultures who built upward with pyramids or steeples, the Nazca carved their cathedrals horizontally, turning the entire desert into a temple where every line was a hymn written in dirt. Yet mysteries remain. If these were divine messages, why create so many overlapping designs rather than maintaining clear, singular symbols? And why expend such effort on art meant for gods who likely didn't need physical markers to hear prayers? Perhaps the answer lies not in practicality but in the act itself. The labor of creating these lines, the communal effort of planning, scraping, and maintaining them may have been the true offering. In a world where survival was fragile, the greatest sacrifice wasn't gold or goods, but time and toil given willingly to forces beyond human control. So while we may never fully decode what the Nazca said with their desert drawings, the enduring power of this myth reminds us that some messages transcend words. Whether the gods were listening or not, the lines stand as a testament to human yearning, the timeless need to reach beyond what we can touch and whisper to the infinite. One of the wildest myths surrounding the Nazca Lines suggests the ancient people who created them might have mastered flight long before the Wright brothers, that they soared above the desert in primitive aircraft, using this aerial advantage to sketch out their massive designs with impossible precision. At first glance, the idea seems almost plausible. How else could a civilization without modern technology ensure their colossal hummingbirds and spiders remained perfectly proportioned when viewed from above? Proponents of this theory point to the famous Nazca golden airplane, a tiny gold artifact discovered in the region that some claim resembles a sleek, delta-winged jet. They argue this trinket proves the Nazca had knowledge of aerodynamics, perhaps even functional gliders or hot air balloons. Others point to the Nazca's intricate textiles, which depict humanoid figures hovering mid-air as further evidence of airborne aspirations. But let's ground this myth in reality. Archaeologists have uncovered the actual tools used to create the geoglyphs: simple wooden stakes, ropes, and piles of stones used as guiding markers. Experiments have shown that scaling up small designs using grids and basic surveying techniques could easily achieve the large-scale precision we see. And that golden airplane, it's far more likely a stylized bird or insect, part of a rich tradition of zoomorphic art, the so-called flying figures in Nazca textiles. They're probably representations of shamans in trance states, not pilots. What's fascinating is how this myth underestimates human ingenuity. The Nazca didn't need flight to map their designs, just patience, planning, and a deep understanding of perspective. They likely used low hills as natural observation points to oversee their work, adjusting lines as needed. The real marvel isn't imagined flying machines, but the sheer determination of people who transformed their landscape inch by painstaking inch, proving you don't need wings to leave a mark that lasts millennia. Still, the flying myth persists, perhaps because it reflects our own modern awe at the line's scale. In an age where we take aerial views for granted, it's hard to fathom how ancient people could create art meant to be seen from the sky without ever leaving the ground. But that's the magic of the Nazca Lines. They challenge us to see the past not through the lens of our technology, but through the brilliance of those who came before us. Who needs airplanes when you have imagination, cooperation, and 2,000 years of patience? The idea that the Nazca Lines were created by some forgotten, ultra-advanced civilization, perhaps even survivors of Atlantis, is one of those seductive myths that refuses to fade. Proponents argue the sheer scale and precision of the geoglyphs surpass what a simple desert culture could achieve. pointing to the straight lines stretching for miles without deviation as evidence of lost surveying technology. Some go further, suggesting these markings are fragments of a global network built by an ancient superculture whose true purpose we've yet to decipher. But here's what archaeology reveals: the Nazca people were anything but primitive. Their irrigation systems, called puquios, were engineering marvels, spiral-shaped wells tapping into underground aquifers with a sophistication that still functions today. Their textiles displayed weaving techniques so advanced, modern experts struggle to replicate them, and their pottery, vibrant, intricate, and often depicting the very creatures etched into the desert. This wasn't a culture borrowing knowledge from some mythical predecessor. This was a thriving society pushing the limits of their environment. Take the famous Nazca spiral, often cited as proof of advanced mathematical knowledge. While mesmerizing, similar spirals appear in nature from seashells to galaxies, and were independently rediscovered by countless ancient cultures. The Nazca didn't need alien blueprints. They had observation, patience, and generations of accumulated skill. Even the impossibly straight lines make sense when you realize they were likely created using simple sighting methods, aligning posts along natural landmarks, a technique still used by farmers today. What's most revealing is how these myths underestimate indigenous innovation. Across the Americas, from the Maya's celestial observatories to the Incas' earthquake-resistant masonry, pre-Columbian cultures achieved feats modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The Nazca Lines weren't inherited from some lost civilization. They were born from a people deeply attuned to their world, turning the desert itself into a canvas for their brilliance. The real mystery isn't who built them, but why we keep searching for someone else to credit instead of marveling at what humanity can do when creativity meets necessity. Some theorists propose the Nazca Lines form a massive celestial map, not just marking solstices, but representing entire constellations stretched across the desert. This giant zodiac theory suggests each animal geoglyph corresponds to star patterns visible to the Nazca people, with the spider symbolizing Orion or the hummingbird mirroring the Pleiades. At first glance, the idea seems poetic, an ancient people etching their cosmology into the earth itself, turning the desert into a star chart writ large. Yet when astronomers overlay the geoglyphs with known constellations, the matches quickly unravel. The famous Nazca monkey, for instance, twists its tail into a spiral unlike any recognized star grouping in Andean astronomy. Even more telling, many animal figures face directions inconsistent with their supposed celestial counterparts. The zodiac theory also ignores a key cultural detail. Pre-Columbian South American societies didn't organize stars into the same zodiacal systems as Europeans or Mesopotamians. The Inca and their predecessors saw constellations not as animal shapes, but as dark patches in the Milky Way, jaguars, serpents, and other forms outlined by interstellar dust clouds rather than connected stars. Archaeologists point to another flaw: the time gap. Most Nazca Lines date between 200 BCE and 500 CE, while the earliest recorded Andean constellation systems emerged centuries later under the Inca. Without evidence the Nazca categorized stars this way, the zodiac claim relies more on modern projection than historical fact. That's not to say the lines lack celestial ties. The straight ones aligning with solstice sunrises prove otherwise, but forcing them into a Greco-Roman zodiac framework misses the Nazca's unique worldview. What makes this myth persist is our own cultural bias. Western societies have long sought familiar patterns in ancient mysteries, imposing Mediterranean zodiac symbols where none existed. The truth is far more intriguing. Rather than copying star maps, the Nazca may have been creating their own cosmology, one where earthly creatures became celestial intermediaries, their forms bridging the desert and the heavens on terms we're still deciphering. The lines aren't a failed star chart. They're a testament to a culture that saw the sky not as a fixed grid, but as a living story where every glyph was a stanza in an epic only they could fully read. Deep beneath the shifting sands of the Nazca Desert lies a hidden force that shaped this landscape for millennia, the restless movement of tectonic plates. Some theorists propose the Nazca Lines weren't just art or astronomy, but an early warning system for earthquakes, their patterns mirroring fault lines or predicting tremors. On the surface, it seems plausible. Peru sits on the volatile Pacific Ring of Fire where seismic activity is constant, and the Nazca Plate subducting beneath South America triggers regular quakes. Could these ancient people have detected subtle geological clues we've overlooked, encoding them into their desert canvas? The myth gained traction because of the line's uncanny straightness, some stretching miles without deviation, as if tracing invisible fractures in the earth. Proponents point to certain trapezoidal shapes aligning with known fault zones, suggesting they marked high-risk areas. Others argue the spider glyph, with its elongated legs, mimics seismic sensors or symbolizes the Earth's vibrations. There's even speculation that the Nazca used acoustic resonance, noticing how the desert floor emitted strange metallic sounds when struck, a phenomenon caused by underground quartz deposits that can amplify earthquake precursors. But geologists and archaeologists remain skeptical. While the Nazca region is seismically active, no direct evidence links the geoglyphs to fault mapping. The line's alignments with geological features are inconsistent. Some cross faults perpendicularly, while others ignore them entirely. More tellingly, the Nazca culture left no written records or oral traditions mentioning quake prediction. Compare this to ancient China, where earthquake detectors like the famous towed vessels were explicitly documented as early warning devices. Without similar context, the seismic theory relies on selective pattern recognition rather than hard proof. What makes this myth compelling is how it reflects our modern anxieties. In an era where scientists still struggle to predict earthquakes, the idea that an ancient culture cracked the code is tantalizing. But the Nazca likely had a simpler relationship with seismic activity, not as predictors but as adapters. Their underground aqueducts, engineered to withstand shifting ground, prove they understood the land's instability. The lines may have been a spiritual response to this unpredictability, a way to commune with the Earth's power rather than decode it. So while the earthquake predictor theory crumbles under scrutiny, it reveals something profound about how we project our own fears and hopes onto the past. The Nazca Lines endure not because they hold lost scientific secrets, but because they remind us of humanity's timeless dance with forces beyond our control, whether those forces come from the stars or the ground beneath our feet. One of the more unusual theories about the Nazca Lines suggests they weren't just visual spectacles. They were massive sound amplifiers, engineered to carry the voices of priests or the rhythms of drums across the desert during sacred ceremonies. Picture this, chanting reverberating through the geometric trenches, sound waves bouncing off the hardened earth with supernatural clarity, turning the entire plateau into a natural concert hall. Proponents of this myth point to the unique acoustic properties of the desert, its flat, arid terrain, and the way sound can travel unusually far in dry air, as evidence the Nazca intentionally designed their geoglyphs to manipulate sound waves. Acoustic studies have added fuel to this idea. Researchers have noted how certain trapezoidal shapes and straight lines create echoes when clapped or shouted near, with some sound frequencies appearing to resonate more clearly than others. Experiments with low-frequency sounds, like those produced by drums or didgeridoo-like instruments, showed these tones could travel farther along the lines, potentially allowing ceremonies to be heard over great distances. Even the strange metallic ring the desert floor makes when struck, caused by mineral deposits beneath the surface, has been cited as proof the Nazca harnessed the land's natural acoustics for spiritual purposes. But skeptics aren't convinced. While the desert's acoustics are intriguing, there's no direct evidence the Nazca designed the lines specifically for sound amplification. The echoes observed are inconsistent. Some lines enhance sound, while others mute it entirely, suggesting any acoustic effects were likely coincidental rather than intentional. Archaeologists also question why the Nazca would need such elaborate sound systems when their ceremonies probably involved smaller, more intimate gatherings. Unlike the Greek amphitheaters or Inca ceremonial spaces, which were clearly designed for communal acoustics, the Nazca Lines sprawl across miles with no obvious focal point for an audience. What's fascinating is how this myth reflects our modern fascination with merging ancient mysteries with cutting-edge science. The idea that the Nazca were proto-engineers of sonic landscapes appeals to our love of hidden technology, a secret knowledge lost to time. Yet the truth may be simpler and no less profound. If some lines happen to carry sound, the Nazca might have incorporated that phenomenon into their rituals without fully understanding the physics behind it. Imagine a shaman's chant echoing unnaturally across the desert, interpreted not as acoustics but as the voice of the gods. The real lesson here isn't about ancient sound systems, it's about how humans interact with their environment in unexpected ways. The Nazca didn't need to comprehend wave physics to feel the power of a sound that seemed to come from the Earth itself. Whether by design or accident, their lines remind us that the sacred isn't always silent, sometimes it roars. Among the most fantastical myths about the Nazca Lines is the idea that they aren't just ancient art. They're gateways to other worlds, mystical portals humming with energy that could teleport the worthy or unwary to alternate dimensions. This theory, popularized by paranormal enthusiasts and sci-fi stories, paints the desert as a cosmic crossroads where reality frays at the edges. Proponents claim certain geometric shapes emit strange electromagnetic fluctuations, or that shamans once used the lines to traverse spiritual realms, their paths hidden in plain sight. It's a story that feels ripped from a superhero movie, but how did such an outlandish idea take root? The answer lies partly in the line's eerie presence. Standing in the Nazca Desert at twilight, with shadows stretching across the geometric trenches, it's easy to imagine the air vibrating with unseen forces. The plateau's natural acoustics add to the mystique. Wind whistling through the lines can sound almost like distant voices, while the mineral-rich ground sometimes emits faint electronic interference that's been misinterpreted as dimensional energy. Pop culture then amplified these quirks into legend. From episodes of The X-Files to video games like Tomb Raider, the Nazca Lines have been fictionalized as everything from alien stargates to time travel devices, cementing their supernatural reputation. Yet science offers simpler explanations, those so-called electromagnetic anomalies, likely caused by underground metal deposits reacting to solar activity. The portal shapes, standard Nazca designs found across their pottery and textiles, not occult symbols. Even the stories of missing travelers or vanishing researchers near the lines crumble under scrutiny. Most are urban legends with no credible reports. What's revealing is how this myth mirrors older folklore. Indigenous South American traditions often speak of spiritual thresholds, caves, mountaintops, or springs where worlds intersect. The Nazca Lines may have inherited this symbolism, not as literal portals, but as sacred markers of the boundary between earth and spirit. What makes the dimension-hopping theory so stubborn is the same thing that fuels all great myths, our longing for the unexplainable. In a world mapped by satellites and dissected by science, the idea that ancient people might have unlocked secrets we're still groping toward is irresistible. But the truth is no less wondrous. The real magic of the Nazca Lines isn't that they defy physics, it's that they've defied time, surviving centuries as a testament to human creativity. Who needs wormholes when you've turned an entire desert into a masterpiece? Legends of giants roaming ancient Peru have lingered for centuries, and some theorists claim these colossal beings, not the comparatively small Nazca people, were the true architects of the desert's mysterious lines. According to this myth, massive skeletal remains discovered in the region prove a race of towering figures once walked the earth. their sheer size making them the only ones capable of crafting geoglyphs visible from miles above. Stories of these giants appear in local folklore, with Spanish colonial accounts describing unearthed bones as large as a man's thigh, fueling speculation that the Nazca Lines were literally giant-sized blueprints. But let's separate fact from folklore. While oversized skeletal finds have been reported across the Americas, including in Peru, every verified discovery has turned out to be misidentified animal bones or cases of gigantism, a rare genetic condition causing abnormal human growth. The infamous Paracas skulls, often cited as evidence of an ancient giant race, were actually the result of intentional cranial deformation, a common practice among the Nazca and other pre-Columbian cultures to signify status or beauty. Even the Spanish chronicles mentioning giant bones likely misinterpreted the remains of mastodons or other Pleistocene megafauna, their massive ribs and femurs sparking exaggerated tales. Archaeology paints a different picture. The tools used to create the Nazca Lines, simple wooden stakes, ropes, and piles of stones, were perfectly scaled for human hands, not gigantic builders. Excavations of Nazca settlements revealed dwellings and pottery sized for ordinary people, with no architectural evidence suggesting cohabitation with a larger species. Most tellingly, the geoglyphs themselves show no signs of being designed for giants. Their proportions align with human ceremonial spaces, and the paths between figures are no wider than necessary for group processions. So why does the giant builder myth persist? Part of it stems from our tendency to associate monumental achievements with superhuman creators. From the pyramids of Egypt to Stonehenge, awe-inspiring ancient sites often attract legends of gods, aliens, or giants, as if ordinary humans couldn't possibly have achieved such feats alone. But the Nazca Lines stand as a testament to collective effort, not mythical beings. Thousands of ordinary people likely worked across generations, their coordinated labor turning the desert into a shared masterpiece. Perhaps the most poetic rebuttal to the giant theory lies in the lines themselves. Many geoglyphs depict creatures like spiders or hummingbirds, beings far smaller than humans, rendered colossal to honor their spiritual significance. If the Nazca could elevate the tiny to the monumental, why couldn't they, as ordinary-sized people, accomplish the same? The real giants here weren't skeletal anomalies, they were the ideas, the cultural vision, and the perseverance of a people who dared to turn their entire world into a canvas. And that's a truth far more extraordinary than any tall tale. Whispers of curses cling to the Nazca Desert like the fine dust that coats its ancient lines, tales of misfortune striking those who disrespect the geoglyphs, or eerie apparitions glimpsed at twilight along the empty stretches. Locals speak of unexplainable illnesses befalling looters who stole pottery fragments from the sites, or sudden sandstorms swallowing trespassers who ventured off marked paths. One particularly chilling legend tells of a film crew in the 1980s who mocked the line's spiritual significance during a shoot, only to have their equipment malfunction inexplicably before their Jeep overturned on the perfectly flat desert, miraculously leaving no injuries but sparking rumors of supernatural warning. These stories didn't emerge in a vacuum. The Nazca culture itself believed certain spaces held huaca, sacred energy that could bless or punish. Spanish chroniclers recorded indigenous accounts of places where the earth spoke, and modern Quechua communities still avoid disturbing ancient sites without offerings to appease resident spirits. When tourists report feeling dizzy or hearing phantom footsteps near the lines, they're tapping into this deep-seated cultural memory, a fusion of pre-Columbian reverence and universal human unease in vast, silent landscapes. Even scientists aren't immune. Maria Reich, the line's most dedicated researcher, once confessed she felt watched while working alone at dusk, though she dismissed it as fatigue playing tricks. But psychology offers another layer. The desert's harsh environment, blinding sun, disorienting mirages, and that eerie metallic resonance underfoot creates ideal conditions for sensory confusion. Combine that with the weight of history, and it's no wonder people imagine voices in the wind or shadows moving where none should be. The real curse might be our own minds, primed by generations of folklore to interpret every odd gust as something more sinister. Yet there's beauty in these myths too. Whether born from cultural respect or primal fear, they've inadvertently protected the lines for centuries. Where signage fails, stories of curses keep reckless feet off fragile glyphs. The haunted reputation doesn't just thrill tourists, it guards a legacy, ensuring these fragile artworks endure not just in dirt, but in the collective imagination where mystery and reverence intertwine. Beneath the surface of the Nazca Desert, where the famous lines stretch across the sun-baked earth, another layer of mystery waits: rumors of sprawling underground cities, hidden labyrinths connecting the geoglyphs to vast subterranean chambers. This myth, fueled by colonial-era stories of tunnels running beneath the Andes, suggests the Nazca didn't just carve the desert. They hollowed it out, creating secret sanctuaries to escape invaders or commune with underworld spirits. Some even claim these lost corridors hold treasures or advanced technology left behind by a forgotten civilization. But how much of this is rooted in reality? Archaeology tells a different yet equally fascinating story. The Nazca did build underground, just not the fantastical metropolises of legend. Their most impressive subterranean feats were the Puquio's ingenious spiral-shaped aqueducts that tapped into underground water sources. These stone-lined tunnels, some descending over 20 feet, channeled water to the surface through ventilation shafts that still baffle engineers today. Far from being mythic hideaways, the Puquios were feats of survival, turning one of Earth's driest regions into a livable landscape. Excavations have also uncovered small underground chambers used for storage or rituals, but nothing resembling the vast networks of conspiracy theories. Yet the underground city myth persists, partly due to a kernel of truth. In nearby Cusco, the Inca did construct Kenko and other ceremonial sites with elaborate tunnels, some repurposed from natural caves. Spanish chroniclers, conflating different cultures, likely exaggerated these into tales of continent-spanning passages. Modern expeditions using ground-penetrating radar have mapped subsurface voids near Nazca, but these are likely geological formations or collapsed puquios, not proof of hidden civilizations. What's revealing is how this myth reflects human psychology. Underground spaces, from the catacombs of Rome to Derinkuyu's ancient city in Turkey, captivate us as places of refuge and secrecy. The Nazca, facing droughts and threats, might have symbolized safety beneath the earth, hence the Puquios doubling as ritual sites. Their real Undorled wasn't a literal city, but a spiritual one. The belief that life-sustaining water and ancestral spirits dwelt below, mirrored by their skyward geoglyphs above. So while no lost metropolis lies under the lines, the truth of a culture mastering the unseen depths to thrive in plain sight holds its own kind of magic. Perhaps one of the most imaginative myths surrounding the Nazca Lines is the idea that they serve as markers for time travelers. Colossal signposts meant to guide visitors from the future as they navigate different eras. This theory, popularized by science fiction and online conspiracy circles, suggests the lines function like an ancient airport runway system, but for temporal voyagers instead of spaceships. According to this tale, the precision and scale of the geoglyphs make them impossible to miss from any point in history, acting as fixed coordinates in the ever-shifting landscape of time. It's a thrilling concept, one that taps into our fascination with bending the rules of reality. But does it hold up under scrutiny? The time travel theory gained traction partly because of the line's enduring visibility. Unlike structures that crumble or forests that grow over ancient ruins, the Nazca Desert's dry climate has preserved these markings for over 2,000 years with little erosion. To believers, this longevity isn't just luck, it's design. They argue the Nazca intentionally chose this stable environment so their signals would remain readable across millennia. Some even point to the geometric shapes as coded messages, suggesting spirals or zigzags could represent temporal portals or alignment points for hypothetical time machines. But here's where the myth unravels. While the line's preservation is impressive, it's not unique. Other desert geoglyphs, like the Atacama Giant in Chile, have survived just as long without attracting time travel theories. More critically, there's zero evidence the Nazca had any concept of time as a dimension one could traverse. Their cosmology viewed time cyclically, tied to agricultural and celestial rhythms, not as a linear path to be navigated. The idea of marking coordinates for future travelers would have been as alien to them as smartphones or spacecraft. What's revealing is how this myth reflects modern anxieties. In an age where technology advances faster than ethics, the notion that ancient cultures might have held secrets we've yet to rediscover soothes our unease. It's comforting to imagine that if time travel ever becomes possible, someone, even people from the distant past, already figured it out. But the Nazca Lines don't need sci-fi explanations to be extraordinary. Their real magic lies in how they ground us in human ingenuity, not hypothetical futures. These desert drawings weren't meant for time travelers, they were meant for the ages, a testament to a culture that carved its legacy into the earth, knowing full well the only visitors they'd ever greet would be the wind, the stars, and generations of awestruck descendants like us. Among the whispers of alien architects and lost technologies, one of the most spiritually compelling myths about the Nazca Lines paints the animal geoglyphs not as messages or maps, but as sacred spirit guides, eternal protectors etched into the earth itself. Imagine standing before the towering hummingbird, its wings spanning nearly 300 feet, or the sinuous serpent coiling across the desert floor. To the Nazca, these weren't just artworks, they were living conduits to the spirit world, embodiments of powerful allies who could bridge the human and divine. This idea isn't pulled from thin air, it's rooted in the Nazca's deep animistic beliefs, where every mountain, river, and creature hummed with sacred energy. Archaeological evidence shows the Nazca practiced a form of shamanism, with rituals often involving transformation into animal spirits. Their pottery and textiles overflow with hybrid figures, part human, part bird or feline, as if capturing moments when shamans shed their mortal forms to soar or prowl in other realms. The desert's animal glyphs likely served a similar purpose, focal points for ceremonial journeys. A shaman might have traveled along the monkey's twisting tail or followed the spider's geometric legs into trance states, using these colossal pathways to navigate the spirit world. Even the choice of animals holds meaning. The hummingbird, a symbol of resurrection in many Andean cultures, dies each night when its body temperature plummets, only to revive at dawn, making it the perfect guide for rituals about rebirth or ancestral communication. But why carve these guides so large? Scale mattered in Nazca cosmology. By rendering animals colossal, they honored their power and made them visible to the gods above. The condor glyph, stretching over 400 feet, wasn't just a bird, it was a deity's eye view of a celestial messenger. This mirrors other indigenous traditions worldwide, from the animal-shaped effigy mounds of North America to Aboriginal Australian song lines, where landscapes encode sacred stories. The Nazca Lines might have functioned similarly, not just art, but a ritual topography where every curve and line held spiritual weight. Critics argue that if the lines were spirit guides, why aren't they clustered near settlements where rituals would have occurred? Yet this misses the Nazca's intentional separation of sacred and mundane spaces. The desert's emptiness wasn't a drawback, it was the point. The harsh, silent plateau became a purified zone, a place where the veil between worlds thinned. Walking those lines wasn't practical, it was transcendent. Modern pilgrims trek to remote temples or mountaintops for the same reason. Distance from daily life sharpens focus on the divine. What's haunting is how these myths still resonate. Today, some visitors report feeling an uncanny presence near the animal glyphs, a sensation of being watched, or a sudden connection to something ancient. Science might call it suggestion or the desert's disorienting vastness, but the Nazca would have recognized it instantly, the brush of a spirit guide's wing lingering in the dust after 2,000 years. Whether myth or metaphysical truth, the idea transforms these desert drawings from puzzles into something far richer, a conversation etched in stone and time between humans and the forces they believed walked beside them. Some theorists propose the Nazca Lines weren't just art or astronomy, they were a massive weather control system, an ancient attempt to summon rain from the parched skies above the desert. Picture this, priests chanting along the serpentine grooves, their voices rising as they trace the outline of a thunderbird, believing their movements could coax storms from the heavens. It's a poetic idea, especially when you consider how vital water was to the Nazca people. Their survival depended on sporadic rains and hidden aquifers, so why wouldn't they try to influence the elements? This myth draws strength from global parallels. Across the ancient world, cultures performed rituals to sway the weather. The ancestral Pueblones of the American Southwest danced for rain, their ceremonies echoing through kivas carved into the earth. In China, dragon motifs adorned imperial banners, symbols thought to summon life-giving storms. Even the Inca, descendants of the Nazca's cultural legacy, practiced Capacocha sacrifices atop mountains to appease weather deities. If these societies believed human actions could alter the skies, why not the Nazca? Proponents point to the lines' alignment with wind patterns, suggesting their shapes might have been designed to channel air currents or create acoustic effects to call rain. But archaeology tells a more grounded story. While the Nazca certainly revered water, their Puquio's irrigation systems prove that there's no direct evidence they viewed the geoglyphs as meteorological tools. Unlike the Inca, who left detailed records of weather rituals, the Nazca left no carvings or textiles depicting rain-summoning ceremonies tied to the lines. Even the famed rainbird glyph, often cited as proof, more likely represents a coastal pelican than a mythical storm bringer. What's fascinating is how this myth conflates practicality with spirituality. The Nazca didn't need to control weather, they adapted to it. Their trapezoidal geoglyphs might have funneled ceremonial processions, not wind currents, and the line's occasional alignment with water sources speaks to observation, not manipulation. Yet the idea persists because it reflects a universal truth. Ancient people didn't just endure nature, they sought to converse with it. The Nazca Lines may not have been a weather machine, but they were a dialogue, a people whispering to the elements across the silence of centuries, not commanding but pleading, hoping the skies would answer. Among the most destructive myths surrounding the Nazca Lines is the persistent belief that they form an elaborate treasure map, an ancient code leading to hoards of gold, jewels, or sacred artifacts buried beneath the desert. For centuries, fortune hunters have scoured the plateau, convinced that geometric shapes point to hidden vaults or that animal glyphs mark the graves of long-dead kings. The damage left in their wake tells a heartbreaking story. Trenches gouged across pristine geoglyphs, burial mounds looted for pottery shards, and fragile archaeological layers obliterated by shovels in search of fabled riches that likely never existed. The roots of this myth stretch back to colonial times when Spanish conquistadors, already intoxicated by legends of El Dorado, heard indigenous accounts of the deserts writing in the earth. Mistaking spiritual symbolism for literal directions, they hacked at the lines, believing each curve concealed the entrance to a treasure chamber. Fast forward to the 1920s, when amateur archaeologists dynamited portions of the hummingbird glyph, convinced its beak pointed to a royal tomb. Even today, satellite images reveal fresh scars where clandestine diggers tunnel under trapezoids under cover of darkness, their metal detectors wailing over nothing more than mineral deposits or ancient refuse pits. What makes this myth so tragic is how fundamentally it misreads the Nazca culture. Unlike the Inca, who buried elites with golden masks and emerald ornaments, the Nazca placed modest offerings with their dead ceramic vessels, woven textiles, perhaps a shell necklace or two. Their real treasures weren't underground, they were on display for the gods above. The famous treasure of the Nazca, discovered intact in 1927, contained no precious metals, just exquisitely painted pots depicting the very glyphs now mutilated by treasure hunters. The cruel irony, those looted tombs might have held clues to understanding the line's true purpose, but their context was lost forever to greed. Modern technology has only deepened the folly. In 2015, drone footage revealed a previously unknown network of small pits near the spider glyph, sparking a viral theory about secret chambers. Archaeologists soon determined these were likely ceremonial offering pits or natural erosion features, but not before illegal excavators descended, leaving behind cigarette butts and soda cans amid shattered pottery. The real crime isn't just the physical damage, it's the erasure of history in real time, as each disturbed layer makes it harder to separate Nazca rituals from the holes left by those who sought to exploit them. Perhaps the most poignant rebuttal to the treasure map theory lies in the lines themselves. If you were an ancient people hiding wealth, would you carve directions visible from miles away? The Nazca didn't bury their riches, they displayed them openly in the form of knowledge, artistry, and a sacred landscape meant to endure. The true treasure was always right there on the surface, a civilization's soul etched into the earth, priceless precisely because it was never meant to be owned. Some theories suggest the Nazca Lines weren't just static designs, they formed a massive, walkable labyrinth, a twisting ceremonial pathway where ancient rituals unfolded step by step across the desert. Imagine bare feet tracing the outline of a spider or following a zigzagging trench for miles under the scorching sun, each turn imbued with spiritual meaning. This myth hinges on the idea that the line's interconnected patterns weren't meant to be seen from above but experienced from within, like a sacred maze where the journey itself was the prayer. At first glance, the labyrinth theory seems plausible. Many geoglyphs loop and double back on themselves, the famous spirals, for example, or the intricate knot-like designs near Palpa. Some researchers argue these could have functioned like the labyrinthine floors of medieval cathedrals, where pilgrims walked the paths as a form of meditation or penance. Even the straight lines might fit this idea if viewed as segments of a larger, fragmented ritual route. Comparisons to other ancient cultures add weight: the Cretan labyrinth of Greek myth, the Hopi medicine wheels of North America, or the stone-lined pathways of Celtic Britain, all spaces where physical movement mirrored spiritual transformation. But here's where the myth stumbles. Unlike classic labyrinths, which feature continuous, unbroken paths leading to a center, the Nazca Lines are largely disconnected. A spider glyph might intertwine with itself, but it doesn't link to the hummingbird half a mile away. The famous runner figure, a humanoid with one arm raised, stands isolated, as if frozen mid-stride with no path forward. Archaeologists note that while some lines cluster, others sprawl haphazardly, lacking the deliberate flow of true ritual labyrinths. Deeper still, the desert itself resists the idea. Walking the full length of these lines would have been grueling, even dangerous, under the relentless sun. Unlike the shaded stone passages of Chartres or the grassy turns of Troy Town, the Nazca Plateau offers no shelter, no natural markers to guide a traveler. If these were meant as walkable paths, where are the resting points, the water stations, or the worn grooves of countless footsteps? Excavations reveal no artifacts along the lines, no broken pottery from offerings, no worn stones from constant traffic. Yet the myth persists because it speaks to a universal human impulse to make meaning from movement. Perhaps the Nazca didn't walk the lines so much as perform alongside them, their rituals unfolding in the spaces between glyphs like a dance with the desert itself. The real labyrinth wasn't physical, it was symbolic, a map of the soul's journey etched into the earth where every turn held a story only they could fully read. And in that sense, the lines still work their magic today, inviting us to wander their mysteries, even if we never quite find the center. the idea that the Nazca Lines might be remnants of the lost civilization of Atlantis is one of those tantalizing theories that blurs the line between archaeology and fantasy. Proponents of this myth argue the sheer sophistication of the geoglyphs, massive, precise, and enduring, couldn't possibly belong to a simple desert culture. Instead, they claim these markings are the fingerprints of an advanced Atlantean society that fled its sinking homeland and transplanted its knowledge to Peru. Some even point to Plato's original description of Atlantis, noting his mention of great rings and canals, drawing loose parallels to the Nazca's geometric shapes and underground aqueducts. It's a romantic notion, imagining refugees from a fabled utopia carving their legacy into a new world skin. But let's weigh this against the evidence. The Nazca culture wasn't some mysterious anomaly. It was the product of millennia of indigenous development in the region. Archaeological traces show their direct ancestry with the Paracas culture, known for its intricate textiles and burial practices dating back to 800 BCE. Their technology, from pottery kilns to irrigation systems, evolved incrementally with clear precedents in earlier Andean societies. Even the Nazca's famed straight lines find echoes in the older sex system of the Inca, proving these weren't alien concepts but part of a continuous cultural thread. The Atlantis theory also stumbles on chronology. Plato placed Atlantis's demise around 9600 BCE, while the Nazca Lines were created between 200 BCE and 500 CE, a gap wider than the pyramids of Giza to the iPhone. If Atlanteans survived and migrated to Peru, why did they wait over 9 millennia to start etching giant geoglyphs? And why would they abandon their supposed maritime mastery? Atlantis was, after all, an island civilization for a desert plateau. Then there's the matter of style. Atlantean architecture, as described by Plato, featured concentric circles and lavish metals, neither of which appear in Nazca design. The lines are emphatically terrestrial, celebrating local fauna like spiders, monkeys, and hummingbirds, not the seahorses or tridents you'd expect from a culture born in the ocean. Even the Nazca's few marine motifs, like the killer whale glyph, align with species found along Peru's coast, not mythical Atlantean beasts. What's revealing is how this myth reflects a broader pattern, the reluctance to credit indigenous societies with their own achievements. From the pyramids to Stonehenge, ancient marvels often get attributed to lost super-civilizations rather than the people who actually built them. The Nazca didn't need Atlantean tutelage. They had ingenuity honed by necessity, turning a hostile landscape into a spiritual and artistic masterpiece. The real wonder isn't that Atlantis might have created the lines, it's that humans with nothing but sticks, ropes, and collective vision could. Beneath the vast desert canvas of the Nazca Lines lies another layer of speculation, the haunting theory that these geoglyphs mark an immense sacred burial ground, a silent necropolis where the dead were laid to rest beneath the watchful gaze of towering animal spirits. This myth paints the desert as a sprawling cemetery, with each glyph serving as a guardian for tombs hidden below. Some theorists even claim the lines align with underground burial chambers, forming a celestial map to guide souls to the afterlife. It's an evocative idea, one that taps into our fascination with death rituals and the supernatural, but how much of it holds up under the weight of evidence? Archaeology tells a different story. While the Nazca did bury their dead with great care, their tombs weren't scattered randomly beneath the lines. Excavations reveal burial sites clustered near settlements, often in carefully constructed shaft tombs lined with adobe bricks or natural caves. These graves, some dating back to the Paracas predecessors of the Nazca, held mummies wrapped in exquisite textiles, their faces sometimes reconstructed with clay, a practice meant to honor and preserve the deceased. But crucially, none of these burial sites intersect directly with the geoglyphs. The famous lines sprawl across uninhabited plateaus, far from villages or cemeteries, suggesting a deliberate separation between the realms of the living, the dead, and the divine. That's not to say the lines lacked spiritual significance. The Nazca likely saw the desert as a liminal space, a bridge between worlds where the earth met the sky. Their burial rituals focused on returning bodies to the earth, often in fetal positions, as if ready for rebirth. Meanwhile, the geoglyphs soaring overhead may have represented a different kind of journey, not downward into the soil but upward toward the heavens. Some researchers propose the animal figures symbolized spiritual guides, helping souls ascend rather than marking where they lay. The disconnect between myth and reality becomes even clearer when examining looters' trenches. For centuries, treasure hunters have dug into the lines, expecting to find gold or mummies beneath the trapezoids. Instead, they've uncovered only sterile soil untouched by human remains. Even modern ground-penetrating radar surveys show no evidence of chambers or graves beneath the glyphs. The real tragedy: this relentless digging has damaged irreplaceable archaeology while chasing a fantasy that ignores the Nazca's actual burial customs. What's revealing is how this burial ground myth mirrors misunderstandings about other ancient sites. From the pyramids of Egypt to the mounds of Cahokia, people often assume monumental structures must house the dead. But the Nazca Lines challenge that assumption. They weren't tombstones, they were something far more dynamic. If anything, the absence of burials makes them more intriguing. These weren't markers of endings, but perhaps invitations, a call to the living to walk the paths, to trace the shapes, and in doing so, to touch something eternal. The desert wasn't a graveyard, it was a temple without walls, where every line whispered not of death, but of connection. Some of the most extravagant myths about the Nazca Lines suggest they weren't crafted by human hands at all, that celestial beings, angels, or even sky gods descended to sculpt these colossal figures across the desert as signs of their divine presence. This ethereal theory imagines supernatural artists tracing perfect spirals with floating fingers or weaving geometric patterns with beams of light, leaving behind a celestial signature too vast for mere mortals to comprehend. Ancient astronaut enthusiasts sometimes blend this idea with alien intervention theories, while New Age circles describe the lines as energetic imprints left by higher dimensional beings visiting Earth in antiquity. The appeal is obvious. It transforms the desert into a sacred autograph book signed by forces beyond our understanding. But the reality is far more human and no less wondrous. Archaeology reveals the painstaking labor behind each glyph. Excavations have uncovered simple tools like wooden stakes and frayed ropes, along with piles of carefully removed stones, the Nazca equivalent of a construction site. Experiments using these primitive techniques prove how methodically the lines were built. Teams would first sketch small-scale designs, then scale them up using grids of ropes and stakes, meticulously removing the dark surface stones to expose the lighter earth beneath. The famous spider glyph, for instance, would have required workers to painstakingly outline its 8 legs, each curve adjusted by eye from ground level without aerial vantage points. This was no overnight project. Some geoglyphs show signs of being maintained for generations, with layers of renewed scraping visible in the soil. What makes these celestial creator myths so persistent is our own modern impatience. In an age of laser measurements and satellite imaging, it's difficult to fathom how ancient people could achieve such precision without divine intervention. But the Nazca weren't working against time, they were working with it. Where we see impossibility, they saw a communal project spanning lifetimes, each generation adding to the desert's living canvas. Their technology wasn't magic, it was mathematics, patience, and an intimate knowledge of their environment. The straight lines linked to underground water sources. The animal figures mirrored in their textiles and pottery, proving these were cultural symbols, not alien doodles. Perhaps the most poetic rebuttal to the celestial artist theory lies in the lines' imperfections. Viewed up close, many glyphs show corrections, places where the Nazca adjusted a curve or widened a line, their human fingerprints visible in the very marks some claim were made by gods. These aren't the flawless strokes of supernatural beings. They're the work of calloused hands and squinting eyes, of trial and error under a relentless sun. The real miracle isn't that angels might have carved the lines. It's that ordinary people did, turning collective effort into something that feels, even centuries later, touched by the divine. So while the celestial myth offers cosmic wonder, the truth holds its own kind of awe. The Nazca Lines weren't handed down from the heavens. They were coaxed from the earth, stroke by stroke, by people who saw their desert not as a wasteland, but as a living parchment waiting to be inscribed. And in that act of creation, they bridged the human and the heavenly far more profoundly than any visitor from the stars ever could. One of the strangest myths about the Nazca Lines suggests they functioned as enormous slingshots, an ancient hunting aid designed to launch projectiles across the desert with terrifying force. According to this theory, the long straight lines acted as guides or tracks for massive stones or spears, while the trapezoidal shapes served as tension points for giant elastic ropes made from animal sinew or woven plants. Proponents point to the lines' precise angles and the Nazca's need to hunt in an arid environment, painting a picture of prehistoric ingenuity turned deadly on a colossal scale. But let's unravel this idea thread by thread. Archaeologists have uncovered actual Nazca hunting tools, and they're decidedly human-sized. Slings, known locally as huarocas, were common, but these were handheld weapons made from woven fibers, capable of hurling small stones with accuracy. No evidence exists of scaled-up versions, nor of the massive frames or anchors such a system would require. The desert's fragile pampa soil, easily disturbed by wind, would have been a terrible surface for launching heavy projectiles. Any giant slingshot would have destabilized its own foundation with a single use. Even the logistics defy practicality. Hunting with oversized projectiles would have been absurdly inefficient. Why spend weeks carving a mile-long track to launch one boulder when a group of hunters with spears or nets could secure food more reliably? The Nazca's real survival strategy revolved around sustainable practices: irrigated agriculture, herding llamas, and fishing along the nearby coast. Their largest prey, like deer or guanacos, could be taken down with conventional weapons, not hypothetical desert ballistae. The myth likely stems from a modern misreading of the line's visual impact. Seen from above, their geometric precision might evoke engineering schematics to untrained eyes. But on the ground, the truth is humbler and more fascinating. Those straight tracks, likely ceremonial pathways for processions, the trapezoids gathering spaces for rituals, not tension points for mythical weapons. The Nazca didn't need giant slingshots to thrive. They mastered their environment with patience, cooperation, and tools that fit in their hands. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in the line's fragility. A weapon of that scale would have left scars, deep grooves from repeated use, broken anchors, or scattered debris. Instead, the geoglyphs remain pristine, their edges softened only by time. The real ammunition here wasn't rocks, but meaning every line a testament to a culture that shaped their world not through force, but through artistry and shared purpose. So while the giant slingshot theory sparks the imagination, the reality proves something just as powerful. Human ingenuity doesn't always scale up. Sometimes the smallest tools leave the most enduring marks. Among the more esoteric myths surrounding the Nazca Lines is the idea that they form part of a global energy grid, ancient power lines channeling invisible Earth energies across the planet. New Age theorists describe the geoglyphs as nodes in a vast network of ley lines, where cosmic and terrestrial forces intersect, pulsing with mystical vibrations. Some claim these currents can be felt underfoot, tingling sensations or warmth along the trapezoids, while others insist the lines align with distant sacred sites like Stonehenge or the pyramids of Giza, forming a celestial circuit board etched into the Earth's crust. It's a seductive vision, one that marries archaeology with metaphysics, but does it hold up to scrutiny? The ley line concept itself has murky origins. Early 20th century, amateur archaeologist Alfred Watkins first proposed the idea in Britain, suggesting straight alignments between ancient landmarks served as prehistoric trade routes. By the 1960s, the theory morphed into something more mystical, with proponents like John Mitchell recasting these lines as channels for Earth energies or dragon currents. The leap to Nazca was inevitable, its geometric precision seemingly perfect for such speculations. Yet modern archaeology dismisses ley lines as selective pattern finding. Draw enough straight lines on a map, and some will inevitably connect distant sites purely by chance. When researchers applied statistical analysis to alleged ley alignments, they found no significant clustering beyond random probability. As for the Nazca Lines specifically, the energy grid theory crumbles under basic geography. The plateau's geoglyphs don't point toward other global sacred sites. They meander independently, often ending abruptly or intersecting at odd angles. Satellite surveys show no measurable electromagnetic anomalies along the lines compared to the surrounding desert. Even the local geology contradicts the idea. Unlike places like Sedona or Glastonbury, where quartz-rich rock can generate weak piezoelectric effects, the Nazca Desert soil lacks minerals known to interact with energy fields. Those reported tingles visitors sometimes feel, likely psychosomatic, a mix of awe, suggestion, and the desert's natural thermal radiation under the scorching sun. What's revealing is how this myth reflects modern desires more than ancient realities. In an era where invisible forces, Wi-Fi, radio waves, quantum fields, dominate technology, it's tempting to project similar frameworks onto the past. The Nazca didn't need mystical energy to explain their world. Their power came from tangible ingenuity. Their irrigation systems harnessed real underground water, not hypothetical earth currents. Their rituals invoked celestial cycles, not pseudoscientific vibrations. The line's true magic wasn't in channeling energy. It was in expressing a worldview where art, science, and spirit were inseparable. Yet there's poetry in how these myths evolve. Whether as energy grids or celestial messages, the Nazca Lines continue to inspire precisely because they resist easy categorization. They remind us that human creativity, like the desert wind, can carve paths we're still learning to follow, even if those paths lead us away from the answers we think we want and toward questions far more profound. Some conspiracy theorists propose the Nazca Lines weren't just a local phenomenon. They were part of a vast, secretive network spanning the ancient world, symbols of a global cult whose members from Egypt to Easter Island communicated through shared geometric codes. This myth suggests the lines mirror patterns found in Celtic stone circles, Hopi desert glyphs, or even the labyrinthine floor of Chartres Cathedral, as if ancient initiates worldwide were leaving behind a unified message for those in the know. The idea taps into our fascination with hidden connections, painting the Nazca Plateau as just one chapter in a planet-spanning mystery. But let's untangle this theory strand by strand. While it's true that many ancient cultures created geoglyphs, from the Uffington White Horse in England to the Blythe intaglios in California, these emerged independently, shaped by local environments and beliefs. The Nazca Lines stand apart in both scale and purpose. Unlike the abstract swirls of Celtic art or the humanoid figures of the American Southwest, Nazca glyphs overwhelmingly depict regional flora and fauna, hummingbirds, spiders, and monkeys native to Peru's coastal ecosystems. Even their geometric trapezoids find echoes in Nazca textiles and pottery, grounding them firmly in local tradition rather than some universal cult aesthetic. Archaeology offers another rebuttal: timing. The Nazca culture flourished between 200 BCE and 500 CE, centuries removed from the peak of Celtic or Hopi glyph making. Claims of a shared cult would require this secret society to persist unchanged for millennia, despite no evidence of contact between these distant civilizations. Take the famous Nazca spiral, often compared to Celtic triskells or Maori koru designs. Similar spirals appear in nature, from nautilus shells to galaxy arms, and were independently rediscovered by cultures worldwide as symbols of cyclical time or growth. The Nazca didn't need outside influence to appreciate this universal pattern. What fuels this myth is our modern hunger for interconnectedness. In an age of the internet, the idea that ancients might have had their own worldwide web, etched into deserts and hillsides, feels thrilling. But the truth celebrates human diversity. The Nazca didn't replicate global templates, they innovated, turning their desert into a canvas unlike any other. Their lines weren't a cult cipher, but a culture's signature, bold, unique, and rooted in the land they called home. Perhaps the most poetic counterpoint lies in the line's very isolation. Unlike Stonehenge or the pyramids, built along trade routes where ideas could mix, the Nazca Plateau was remote, its people culturally distinct. Those hummingbird glyphs weren't meant for foreign eyes, they were love letters to the skies above Peru, written in a language only the wind and the gods could fully understand. The real marvel isn't that these lines might connect to some global cult, but that they stand magnificently alone, a testament to a people who needed no secret handshakes or cosmic codes to create something timeless. Their cult wasn't worldwide, it was wondrously, defiantly their own. One of the more unexpected theories about the Nazca Lines reimagines the entire desert plateau as a colossal sports arena, an ancient stadium where athletes raced along the straight tracks, competed in trapezoidal arenas, or even reenacted ceremonial games under the watchful eyes of gods and spectators. At first glance, the idea seems almost plausible. The line's geometric precision mirrors modern running tracks, while the vast open spaces could have accommodated crowds. Some proponents even suggest the animal glyphs served as team mascots or symbolic obstacles in elaborate ritual competitions. But to uncover the truth, we need to step off the starting block and examine what we know about how the Nazca actually played. Archaeology reveals a very different picture of Nazca recreation. Unlike the Maya with their ball courts or the Greeks with their Olympics, the Nazca left no evidence of organized sports. Their pastimes were intimate, woven into daily life. Excavations in Nazca settlements have uncovered small, polished stones likely used in games of chance or skill. Think early versions of marbles or dice. Murals and pottery shards depict scenes of dancing and music, not competitive athletics. Even their famed ceremonial wrestling, a practice seen in later Andean cultures like the Moche, appears absent from Nazca art. The logistical challenges of the sports arena theory are even more telling. The longest Nazca lines stretch over 12 miles, far beyond the endurance limits of even elite athletes, especially under the desert's blistering sun. Unlike Roman circuses with tiered seating, the plateau offers no vantage points for spectators to observe races. Most damning, the desert's fragile pampa soil, which crumbles underfoot, would have made for terrible running conditions. Modern experiments show that even light foot traffic can permanently damage the lines, hardly suitable for repeated sporting events. What makes this myth intriguing is how it projects modern athletics onto the past. We see straight lines and assume races, trapezoids and imagine goalposts, but the Nazca's relationship with movement was likely more spiritual than competitive. Those long tracks might have been processional pathways for rituals where the act of walking itself held sacred meaning. The trapezoids could have been gathering spaces for communal dances, not cheering sections. The real sport of the Nazca wasn't about speed or scores, it was endurance of another kind. Creating these lines required generations of coordination, patience, and shared vision. If there's a competition hidden in the desert, it wasn't between athletes, but between humanity and the elements, a marathon of creativity that's still running, unbroken after 2,000 years. One intriguing theory suggests the Nazca lines weren't just local art, they were massive communication symbols meant to signal distant civilizations, perhaps even cultures across the ocean. This myth paints the desert as an ancient billboard, its sprawling glyphs visible from high altitudes or even space, broadcasting messages to far-off peoples. Proponents argue that the precision and scale of the lines imply a purposeful design meant to be seen from great distances, as if the Nazca were attempting to reach someone or something beyond their isolated plateau. But let's examine the realities of Nazca society. The Nazca people thrived in one of the most geographically isolated regions of the ancient world. Shielded by the Andes to the east and the vast Pacific to the west, their civilization developed largely in isolation, with limited contact even with neighboring cultures until much later periods. There's no archaeological evidence, no trade goods, no shared technologies, no linguistic traces, to suggest they interacted with distant societies capable of viewing the lines from above. Even their closest contemporaries, like the Moch to the north, left no records of Nazca contact, let alone cross-continental communication. The myth also stumbles on practicality. If the lines were meant as signals, what civilization could have seen them? No known pre-Columbian culture possessed flight, and the idea that overseas travelers might have spotted them from ships is equally flawed. The lines are virtually invisible from sea level, blending into the desert's monotony until viewed from hundreds of feet in the air. Even more puzzling, many of the most recognizable figures, like the hummingbird or the spider, face inward toward the mountains rather than outward toward potential observers. What this theory overlooks is the Nazca's own worldview. Their art and artifacts reveal a culture deeply rooted in their environment, celebrating local flora, fauna, and celestial cycles. The lines weren't meant for outsiders, they were expressions of identity, spirituality, and survival. The straight tracks may have aligned with water sources, the animal glyphs with seasonal rituals. This wasn't a civilization shouting into the void, it was one whispering to the earth and sky, crafting symbols too intimate to be meant for strangers' eyes. Yet the persistence of this myth speaks to a deeper human instinct, the longing to believe we've always been connected. In a globalized age, it's comforting to imagine ancient peoples reaching across continents, as if the lines were prehistoric satellites beaming messages through time. But the truth is far more profound. The Nazca didn't need distant civilizations to validate their art. They created a language of shapes so bold, so enduring, that millennia later, we're still straining to hear what they were saying, not to others but to themselves. Among the more imaginative theories about the Nazca lines is the claim that these desert drawings aren't just animals and geometric shapes. They're encoded maps of legendary lost continents like Mu or Lemuria. According to this myth, the sprawling glyphs outline coastlines of forgotten lands swallowed by the sea, with the famous astronaut figure serving as a warning from these advanced civilizations before their demise. Proponents point to the lines' precise angles as proof of cartographic knowledge beyond what the Nazca should have possessed, suggesting they inherited blueprints from a pre-flood world. The Mu and Lemuria legends themselves are fascinating cultural artifacts. Mu, first proposed in the 19th century by Augustus Le Plongeon, was said to be a Pacific civilization akin to Atlantis, while Lemuria, originally a hypothetical land bridge explaining lemur fossils across continents, morphed into tales of a spiritually advanced society. Both stories captured the public imagination at a time when archaeology was young, and the world still held unexplored corners, but modern geology has thoroughly debunked these continents. Plate tectonics explains fossil distributions without requiring lost landmasses, and sonar mapping reveals no sunken cities beneath the Pacific. When we compare these myths to the actual Nazca geoglyphs, the disconnect becomes glaring. The lines overwhelmingly depict local fauna, hummingbirds, spiders, and monkeys native to Peru's ecosystems. The so-called coastlines of Mu or Lemuria, they're abstract trapezoids and spirals that bear no resemblance to any known continent, past or present. Even the most creative attempts to overlay the lines with hypothetical maps fall apart upon closer inspection. The proportions are all wrong, and the shapes lack the jagged edges of real shorelines. Archaeology offers a simpler explanation. The Nazca's imagery consistently reflects their environment and cosmology. Their pottery and textiles feature the same animals seen in the glyphs, often with symbolic meanings, the spider representing rain, the hummingbird resurrection. These weren't maps of imaginary lands but reflections of their lived reality, where every creature held spiritual significance. What's revealing is how this myth projects Victorian-era obsessions onto the past. The late 19th and early 20th centuries birthed countless lost civilization theories, fueled by colonial mindsets that couldn't fathom non-Western cultures achieving sophistication independently. The Nazca didn't need Atlantean cartographers or Lemurian refugees. Their genius was homegrown, their art born from the very soil they walked. The enduring allure of this theory speaks to our love of hidden histories. There's romance in imagining a global network of forgotten civilizations whispering secrets across millennia, but the Nazca Lines resist such fantasies. They're not cryptic messages from drowned worlds, they're bold declarations of a people deeply rooted in their own land, turning the desert into a mirror that reflects not lost continents, but the vibrant, living world they called home. Among the most persistent and easily debunked myths about the Nazca Lines is the claim they aren't ancient at all, but an elaborate 20th century hoax. Conspiracy theorists argue the lines were carved in the 1930s or 40s, perhaps as a tourist attraction or even a psychological warfare experiment. Some go further, suggesting early aerial photographers like Robert Schippe or Georg von Brüning orchestrated the entire spectacle to sell newspapers or fund archaeological expeditions. On the surface, this theory preys on our skepticism. How could a primitive culture create such precise designs without modern tools? But peel back just one layer, and the entire argument collapses under the weight of overwhelming evidence. Let's start with the dating. Modern archaeologists use a combination of radiocarbon dating, thermoluminescence testing, and stratigraphy to analyze the lines. Soil samples from the trenches contain microscopic organic material, pollen, plant fibers, even ancient insect casings that consistently date between 200 BCE and 500 CE. The patina on displaced stones, known as desert varnish, shows centuries of oxidation layers impossible to fake. Even more damning for hoax claims, the lines are buried beneath sediment layers deposited long before the 20th century, with some geometric shapes obscured by thousand-year-old flood deposits no forger could have predicted. Historical records demolish the hoax theory further. Spanish colonial documents from the 1500s describe strange markings in the desert, noted by conquistadors, while 19th century land surveys by Peruvian officials meticulously mapped the plateau's indecipherable trenches decades before airplanes made aerial photography possible. The clincher, Nazca pottery fragments found beneath some geoglyphs, unearthed in excavations during the 1920s, years before Schippe's famous flights brought worldwide attention to the site. These ceramics match known Nazca styles from the first millennium, covered in depictions of the same animals now etched into the desert. What's revealing is why this myth persists despite such irrefutable proof. Partly, it's our tendency to distrust what we can't easily explain. The line's precision feels too modern to some observers, as if ancient peoples couldn't possibly orchestrate such scale without blueprints or drones. But the hoax theory also reflects a deeper bias, the assumption that non-Western achievements require external validation. It's no coincidence that no one questions the age of Stonehenge or the Parthenon with the same vigor applied to the Nazca Lines. The truth isn't just that the lines are ancient, it's that their creation was a communal masterpiece, achievable precisely because they didn't rely on modern shortcuts. Without aerial views, the Nazca used low hills as natural observation points, adjusting lines by eye over generations. Without metal tools, they utilized wooden stakes and woven ropes to plot geometric perfection. Far from being a hoax, the lines stand as one of humanity's purest examples of collective vision, proof that patience and cultural memory can achieve what skeptics mistake for impossibility. So while the hoax myth might make for a provocative headline, it ultimately diminishes something far more extraordinary: the genius of ordinary people who turned their entire world into a canvas, not for fame or profit, but because they saw the desert not as empty, but as a space waiting to be filled with meaning. And that's a truth no conspiracy can erase. From alien landing strips to lost cities of Atlantis, from celestial calendars to whispers of ancient curses, the myths surrounding the Nazca Lines reveal far more about us than they do about the desert they're etched into. These 30 stories, some wild, some plausible, all utterly captivating, show how humanity grapples with the unknown, transforming blank spaces on the map into canvases for our boldest imaginations. Whether it's the allure of extraterrestrial visitations or the romance of forgotten super-civilizations, each myth is a testament to our unshakable need to fill mystery with meaning. But here's the beautiful paradox: the more we unravel these legends, the more extraordinary the truth becomes. The Nazca Lines weren't built by giants or time travelers. They were crafted by real people with sticks and ropes, their hands shaping the earth under the same sun that still bakes the desert today. That's the real magic: no angels or aliens required. Just human ingenuity, patience, and a collective vision so vast it still leaves us breathless centuries later. Now it's your turn. Which myth captivated you the most? The idea of shamans walking sacred pathways, the theory of underground water maps, or maybe the haunting tales of desert curses? Drop your favorite in the comments. We'd love to hear what sparks your curiosity. And if you're hungry for more ancient enigmas, don't forget to subscribe. From Egypt's hidden chambers to the wilds of Easter Island, we've got plenty of historical mysteries left to explore together. After all, the past isn't just a series of answers, it's an invitation to keep asking questions. So let's keep digging. The next great mystery is just one click